This happened to me in the summer of 2012. My longtime boyfriend Brock and I had recently gotten married. Even though we were dirt-poor college students and lived in a dinky apartment, we were having a blast. That particular summer, we gathered with our friends at the local movie theater almost every weekend. There was one just down the street from our apartment that had really cheap movie tickets. A night out that was under $10 was certainly within our budget. Anyway, one Thursday night I received a call from this group of friends inviting us to watch the midnight premiere of the newest Batman movie. I had just finished working a 12-hour shift and was pretty tired, but I didn't want to miss out on the fun. At 10:30 p.m. we met at the theater. We passed large cardboard cutouts of Catwoman and Batman as we walked inside, greeted by the smell of buttery popcorn and the chatter of excited moviegoers. The ticket booth was to the right of the entrance, and just above that was an electronic list of movies being played. The 12 a.m. showing of The Dark Knight Rises was displayed up there in bright red letters. One of my friends had purchased tickets for all of us earlier that day, so we went straight to Theater 9. The room was packed, but we managed to find a row with 5 empty seats, about 3 to 4 rows up from where the seating rows start to elevate. My husband sat in the 5th seat. I sat next to him, and my friends Samantha, Tommy, and Leo took the remaining seats toward the aisle. Of all the people I saw while waiting, the person I will never forget was a cute little blonde girl sitting in our same row a few chairs away, passing us several times on her way to the lobby for snacks. Eventually, the lights dimmed and the movie started. The theater erupted into cheering as The Dark Knight Rises exploded onto the screen. I was exhausted from being awake for 20 hours, so I closed my eyes during the slower scenes. When I opened them again, Bruce Wayne was on his computer. This is the last scene I saw. All of a sudden, a loud bang erupted from the left side of the theater. I sort of screamed a little because it startled me. A strange smell started to fill the auditorium. It was like the smell of a firework, so I thought it was a cherry bomb or something similar. Then, down near the right side of the movie screen, the dark silhouette of a person caught my attention. They were just a black frame against the bright movie screen. A series of flashing lights was coming from this person. It was a weird moment where time literally slowed down and everything went strangely quiet. I was completely frozen, unable to move, and really unable to think at all. It was like my brain had stopped working entirely. Brock caught on immediately. He grabbed me, pulled me to the ground, and lay on top of me, shielding me with his own body. At this point, time and sound returned to me. I could hear the gunshots ringing out across the theater. People were screaming. The flashing lights I had seen were bullets flying out of a gun barrel. At one point, shrapnel hit my head, cutting off a good chunk of my hair, and as I reached for the spot to make sure it wasn't bleeding, hot pieces of metal fell into my hand. I was lying face up, so I could see everything that was happening. My friends were on the floor with me. Our unfinished bucket of popcorn was spilled all across the floor. Leo had his legs sticking out into the aisle because there wasn't enough room for him to hide completely behind the seats. At some point, Samantha's water bottle, which had been in the cup holder between our seats, exploded. Water splashed all over my face. Riot-grade tear gas made me cry and caused me to cough uncontrollably, and the horrible metallic smell of blood filled the air. I remember my lower body feeling wet all of a sudden. For some reason, I thought this came from the leaking water bottle, but I soon realized this wasn't the case. The bullet stopped for some reason. Tommy shouted, "Let's get out of here!" We took advantage of the opportunity, ran down the stairs, and crammed into a small, dark exit door space. Blinded by the tear gas and dumbfounded by shock, I frantically felt for the metal handle and pushed against it with all my strength. The door flew open and we all fell over onto the concrete outside. As I scrambled to my feet, I realized my legs were absolutely soaked with blood. I checked my body all over and realized I wasn't injured at all. I looked behind me and realized that the blood was my husband's. He had been shot in the leg. A massive, gaping hole had ripped through the lower half of Brock's right leg. His foot was barely hanging on and dangled lifelessly. Leo and another young man carried Brock because he had lost all his strength and couldn't walk. I screamed, alerting nearby construction workers down the street. They stopped working and helped carry Brock along the back sidewalk all the way to the corner of the building. My husband then collapsed from exhaustion and pain. He lay down, and a puddle of blood started to form beneath him, leaving a trail leading from the exit door all the way to our current position. Tommy had been shot in the knee and the hip and was further away in the parking lot. I took off my shirt and used it to stop Brock's bleeding. The police showed up within a minute or two. Brock was bleeding out for almost 20 minutes before an ambulance arrived. At this point, he had become almost unresponsive and was on the verge of unconsciousness. Paramedics rushed him away on a stretcher. I wasn't able to go with him because there was another injured person in the ambulance, and it was too crowded. I wandered around to the front of the theater alone, dazed and covered in blood. Eventually, police started letting people leave. I jumped into my truck and booked it out of there. I was in such a panic that I didn't even think to go back to my apartment, grab my cell phone, which I had forgotten, and call my parents or someone else to help me. Thankfully, by the time dawn rolled around, I found the hospital he was treated in. This was in the next city over. The hospital staff were all so welcoming and understanding. After making sure I wasn't injured, they let me wait in the ICU room that Brock would be placed in when he was done recovering from surgery. Brock and Tommy both survived, though many others weren't so lucky. I found out the following day that 12 people were killed in this shooting, and over 70 were injured. The little blonde girl sitting in my row did not survive. She died in the theater, no more than a few feet from us. Tommy underwent surgery and made a full recovery. The bullet missed his hip bone and narrowly missed his urinary tract and bladder. My husband lost almost half his blood and underwent several blood transfusions. The wound to his leg was severe enough that they had to amputate it after trying unsuccessfully to save it. I later learned much about the shooter from the televised murder trial that took place in early 2015. This guy was going to school for neuroscience or something in California. However, for some reason he had an obsession with killing people and had a stalker mentality. Before that, he was planning on hiding along remote hiking trails up in the mountains, jumping people, pulling them into the woods and killing them there, though he never went through with that idea. He stalked my theater for months and had this shooting all planned out for the night of July 20th. To commit this crime, he ordered a few thousand rounds of ammunition, riot gear and armor, tear gas, an assault rifle, and a shotgun. He took pictures of himself, which were shown in court, wearing all of this gear like some sick trophy and holding up these weapons with a menacing smile. He dyed his hair orange and put in these creepy black contacts while making devilish faces into his camera, something that made me sick just looking at. Before driving to the theater, he booby-trapped his entire apartment and set it to explode if anyone opened the door. Once at the theater, he posed as a moviegoer and even bought a ticket for the movie. I think his ticket had Theater 8 on it, which was next door, but Theater 9 had more people in it, so he went into number 9 instead. At some point during the movie, he went through the side exit, kept it propped open, went to his car to put on his armor and weapons, and came back inside. The only thing stopping him from killing us in the hallway as we ran for the emergency exit was his jammed assault rifle. The hardest part for me was facing this twisted individual in court. I'll never forget rising as they called my name, walking down the center row past my family, other survivors, and crowds of news-hungry media personnel. I sat right across from him, maybe only 10 feet away. He just had this blank stare in his eyes the whole time. filled with nothing but a cold indifference for those he had murdered and harmed. At the end of it all, he was sentenced to 3,318 years in prison for his crimes. To the man who carried out the worst mass shooting in Colorado history, hope you rot in prison. I'm a 31-year-old stay-at-home mother of 2 young children. So once my husband gets home from work, I like to take some time to myself and go shopping, take a drive or run errands, kid-free. It was around 8:30 p.m. when I arrived at the Target I frequent. I'm by no means a paranoid or anxious individual, but I have attended several seminars in college on human trafficking and have done plenty of research on my own learning to identify red flags and what precautions to take when out in public alone, especially at night. I carry several self-defense items on my person at all times just in case. I parked directly in front of the store, next to a cart caddy. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary that night, and the parking lot was actually quite empty most likely, because it was a weekday. As I entered the store, I began browsing like usual, following the natural flow of the store departments, following the main aisle around. I had been browsing for only 10 to 15 minutes when I noticed a young gentleman, mid-20s. He was tall, skinny, dressed in a dirty gray 2-piece sweatsuit and brown work boots. He looked over at me. I smiled and said hello, but his facial expression was blank. He looked like to what he may have been high on something by the look in his eyes, but he didn't seem to care for my gesture, and he quickly moved on. At first glance, there was nothing in particular that alarmed me about him, except I took notice at the fact he was just wandering down the main aisle with no cart or basket, hands in his pockets, and didn't seem to be with anyone. I continued shopping with no second thoughts and made my way to the next department. Several minutes had passed, and that's when I noticed a second young gentleman wearing the same gray sweatsuit and similar pair of work boots. Again, no cart, no basket. He too glanced at me, then quickly darted his eyes away when he realized I was looking directly at him. I became a bit more alerted, but still remained composed and continued on browsing. Another 15 minutes or so passed, and that's when a third older man caught my attention, and you guessed it, same gray sweatsuit and work boots with no cart, no basket, just his hands in his pockets. I assumed they were in some sort of work uniform, maybe construction workers. But why weren't they walking around together, and why didn't they have any items to purchase? At this point, it was difficult to focus on browsing. I had a bad feeling about these 3 men, and it became clear that something was a bit off. Over the next 20 minutes or so, I felt as if I was being monitored by the 3 of them, as if they were all communicating my whereabouts as I continued to make my way through the store, because each department I entered, it didn't take long for me to notice one of the 3 men pass by whatever side aisle I happened to be in, making their presence known to me. I stayed completely vigilant, while trying not to panic or allow my suspicions to overwhelm me. Something about their presence felt very heavy and dark, so I decided to test their intentions, to prove I wasn't overthinking the situation, and my bad gut feeling was valid. I began picking random aisles and traveling back and forth between departments in a very unorganized and random fashion, to see if the men would continue to pass by me as frequently as they had been. With every aisle I popped into, it was just a few minutes later, one of them would make an appearance, staring me down as they passed by. It felt as if I was being surrounded like a wild animal, hunted even. They were no longer trying to be conspicuous, which was the scariest part of it all, and everything instinctual was screaming at me to get out of there. I gripped my cart so tightly and figured if they got too close, I could use the cart to push them away, or at least create distance between us. By this point, I had been shopping for about an hour altogether, maybe a bit over, and was ready to purchase my items. But honestly, I felt too uncomfortable to continue browsing, even if I wanted to. The men had been following me all that time, and I was becoming more annoyed if anything. The store was pretty empty around this time, one of the main reasons I like shopping at night. But that made this particular situation even more unsettling. 2 preteen girls were wandering around by themselves, which quickly caught my attention because the men had bypassed them making similar advances, but the girls were seemingly oblivious. So I quietly got their attention and asked them to go find their parents and stay with them, trying not to freak them out. The mother in me was in full-on protection mode. I couldn't imagine having my young children with me on this night. Thank God they were home safe and sound. As I made my way to the checkout, I noticed one of the men coming up from behind me, walking at a quicker pace this time, so I immediately stopped and turned to lock eyes with him as he approached. I will never forget the darkness in his eyes. An eerie smirk formed on his face as he nudged my shoulder, continuing to stare me down, walking backwards to hold his sinister gaze as he exited out the store. I had lost sight of the other 2 men, and I hated the uncertainty of it all. He made his message clear in that very moment. My stomach dropped, and my entire body began to shake. It was a feeling I hadn't felt since I was a kid getting lost in the supermarket, a feeling of desperation. I quickly walked to the checkout, discreetly asked the cashier if I could speak to a manager, and told them what had transpired over the last hour, politely asking for a male employee to walk me to my car and for them to alert their security team member. When I told the manager what happened, her face sunk as if she had already known about these men, and once I described them, she confirmed she knew who I was talking about. She expressed that several of the female employees had found the men unsettling in the past, and reassured me that someone would escort me to my car. She made a report about the incident and said she would alert the authorities. I was still shaking, but felt relieved that she believed me and showed concern for the other young female patrons in the store. She took my information. Then a young male employee walked me out to my car. What I saw as I exited the store made me so sick to my stomach, solidifying all of my suspicions. A white windowless van was parked in the lot directly behind my car, about a 3 parking space distance between us. One of the men seated in the driver's seat, and the other 2 leaning against the side of the van facing my car, attempting to hide out of view. I mean, how cliché and obvious can you be? Your license plate might as well read Lady Snatchers at that point. Whatever their intent, it didn't seem pure. I pointed them out to the male employee and said, "There they are," which then prompted the men to scurry into the van and speed out of the parking lot without hesitation. I truly don't know what would have happened if I walked out to my car alone, and I'm so freaking grateful I made it home safe and sound and lived to tell my story. Over the following week, I had heard there were several abduction attempts in the shopping center parallel to that target, and I'm almost certain it was the same individuals.